Welcome back to Robots vs. Vampires. I'm Adrian Smith, and
I'm Julia Jones.
we are ready for another
I'm in a
epic tale. And
Absolutely.
we're calling this deep dive the Bloodstone Heist.
Ooh, very cool.
Yeah, it's got shapeshifting vampires, shadowy underworld, a heist for an artifact that grants immortality.
I mean, what more could you ask for?
I know, right? It's pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah.
So what really stood out to you as we kind of got into this story?
You know what really grabbed my attention was this partnership.
Okay.
We've got Caleb and Anya.
Right.
He's a shapeshifter.
Right.
And she is a vampire.
Interesting combo.
Yeah, not your typical heist crew.
Definitely not.
That's for sure.
So you've got these two kind of coming together, and I mean, their goals must align somehow if they're going after
Right.
the Shadow King.
Well, that's where the Bloodstone comes in, right? This
Yeah.
gem that grants immortality.
Okay.
So, I think for Caleb, it might be freedom. He's constantly changing identities. But for Anya, it's the ultimate power. She can escape the limitations of being a vampire.
Walk in the daylight.
Exactly.
So that's a pretty big motivator.
Huge, yeah.
So let's talk about the heist itself. Like, how do they plan to break into this vault? This isn't, your average security system.
Oh, absolutely not. This is where Caleb's shape-shifting skills really take center stage.
Oh, yeah.
Actually transforms into a guard to infiltrate the fortress.
Clever.
But, it's really interesting. The story highlights how much mental focus it takes to maintain a form.
Right.
Even something as simple as manipulating a padlock.
Wow.
A lot.
Yeah, so it's not just like, changing your appearance. It's really like inhabiting this other person.
Exactly.
And the story even kind of, talks about the vault itself being filled with all these horrors.
Yes.
So, I mean, what do you think lurks in there?
Well, we can only imagine, right, what kind of creatures or artifacts are in there. But it definitely sets this chilling tone. And it, suggests a darkness that goes beyond your typical villain.
So they're in the vault, surrounded by, who knows what. And they get their hands on this bloodstone. It's described as this massive ruby pulsing with energy. I can only imagine what that must feel like.
Oh, yeah, the sense of triumph.
Right.
But, I bet there's also a little trepidation.
Yeah, because, heist stories don't always end smoothly.
Never.
And in this case, Anya betrays Caleb.
That's right, driven by her desire for immortality.
Wow. So it was never a partnership. It was just her own survival.
I guess a vampire's idea of trust is a little different than ours.
Yeah, I guess so.
It really adds this layer of complexity, though, to the story.
Yeah.
Reminds us that even in these fantastical settings, human desires, greed, self-preservation.
Right.
They can drive the most unexpected actions.
And she doesn't just betray him, she bites him like a full-on vampire attack.
Oh, yeah.
So now he's not only on the run from the Shadow King, but
he could be turning into a vampire.
potentially turning into a vampire.
Yeah.
So talk about a ticking clock.
Oh, absolutely. It just adds this whole other layer of tension to the story.
So what happens?
Well, he finds this hidden passage behind a tapestry.
Okay.
And he dives in. He's desperate to escape.
So classic action movie move.
Totally.
But, at the end of this part of the story, we're left with this image of him injured, possibly poisoned,
Yeah.
crawling through this tunnel.
Yeah.
And there's a pinprick of light in the distance.
Right. What is it?
A way out.
A trap. Something even more mysterious.
That's the question, isn't it? And that's where we'll leave you hanging for now.
Ooh.
We'll be back with part 2 of the Bloodstone Heist. But in the meantime, think about this. If you were Caleb, what would you prioritize? Escape, finding a cure, or maybe revenge?
Good questions.
I know, right?
I can't wait to find out what happens next.
Me neither.
Welcome back to Robots vs. Vampires. I'm Julia Jones, and I'm still reeling from that cliffhanger.
I know, right? We left Caleb crawling towards that mysterious pinprick of light, injured, potentially turning into a vampire, and lost somewhere in that lair.
Yeah, I need answers.
Well, the good news is we get some answers in this next part.
Okay, good.
But, the Bloodstone Heist is more than just, quick resolutions.
Right.
It's about really exploring these characters in depth and the world they inhabit.
I like that.
So this is where we really get into the nitty-gritty, right?
Absolutely.
Like, what makes these stories so captivating?
That's what we're here for.
So speaking of hidden layers, this part really shines a light on Caleb's shape-shifting abilities.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We know he's a master of the skies, but how does it actually work?
Right.
What are the limits? I mean, we saw him struggle with that padlock earlier.
Yeah.
Even while maintaining the guard's form.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a lot of mental strain involved.
Yeah, a lot of focus.
Right.
It's not just changing his appearance. It's like he's inhabiting another being.
Totally.
Their thoughts, their mannerisms, even their physical limitations.
Wow. So, I mean, is there anything he can't become? Like, could he just shapeshift into a bat and fly out of there?
Right.
Or, maybe something tiny that can squeeze through a crack?
That's a great question.
Right.
The story doesn't really define the boundaries,
Yeah.
but it makes you consider the possibilities and the implications.
Yeah.
Like, if he can become anything, does that mean he could impersonate anyone, assume any identity?
Whoa.
Right.
That's a whole other level.
It really is.
Like, it's not just escaping a sticky situation. It's like,
It's about identity.
it's about the nature of identity.
Yeah.
So going back to that tunnel, it's not exactly a smooth ride.
Oh, no.
I mean, crumbling walls, claustrophobia, and then there's the whole Shadow King's forces thing.
Right, and we can't forget about Anya's bite.
Oh, yeah. Is he slowly turning into a vampire?
Is there a cure?
So many questions.
I know the story keeps us guessing for sure.
But you mentioned answers earlier.
I did.
So spill it. What's behind that pinprick of light?
Okay, so remember those horrors we talked about? The ones locked away in the vault?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's just say that pinprick of light leads Caleb directly into their midst.
Oh, no. He goes from one dangerous situation straight into another.
It seems that way, doesn't it?
This guy can't catch a break.
But, it forces him to use his shapeshifting in ways we haven't seen before.
Okay.
Not just to escape, but to understand, to adapt.
Interesting. So he's not just running anymore. He's actually, like, strategizing.
Exactly.
He's using his powers to observe these creatures, these horrors, to survive.
Right. It becomes a mental game as much as a physical one.
So does he transform into one of these horrors?
Ooh.
Or does he use his shapeshifting in some other clever way to outsmart them?
I don't want to spoil the surprise.
Okay.
But it really highlights his adaptability, his quick thinking.
Yeah.
It's like he's constantly evolving,
Right.
finding new ways to use his powers, pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
I like it. So we've got this mystery, but we can't forget about Anya.
Oh, that's right.
We left her hanging after that betrayal.
Yeah. What happens to her?
Well, the story mostly follows Caleb's journey, but we do get these glimpses into Anya's fate.
Okay.
It seems her quest for immortality doesn't go quite as planned.
Interesting.
So I guess you could say karma has a way of catching up, even with vampires.
You could say that.
But, I'm dying to know more about her story, her motivations.
Yeah.
Like maybe there's more to her than meets the eye.
Maybe the story leaves room for interpretation.
It does.
Allows us to imagine what drives her, what choices led her down this path.
So that's where we'll leave you for now.
Ooh, another cliffhanger.
We'll be back for the final part of the Bloodstone heist to see if Caleb's gamble pays off.
Will he escape the horrors?
And what will he learn about himself in the process?
And what about Anya's fate?
So many questions.
I know. Stay tuned to find out.
Welcome back to Robots vs. Vampires. It's Adrian, and I am so ready for this finale. I mean, the Bloodstone heist has just been so intense.
I know, right? We left Caleb facing all those horrors in the Shadow King's lair, using his powers in ways we've never even seen before.
Right. And I still can't get over the fact that he's dealing with Anya's bite. Like, is he turning? Did he find some miracle cure?
So many questions, but don't worry, this last part it delivers.
Okay, good.
It answers some questions, raises even more, and really makes us think about Caleb's powers and the choices that he makes.
Okay. I'm intrigued, but before we go any further, can we talk about these horrors?
Yes.
The story's been super vague, just hinting at how scary they are. But what are they exactly?
They keep their true form shrouded in mystery, but they're definitely not your average monsters.
Right.
It seems like they're these incredibly powerful beings, maybe even sentient, trapped in the Shadow King's domain.
So it's not just about escaping a physical prison. It's like navigating this world of unknown dangers and maybe even having to make some tough choices to survive.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. Caleb, in his desperation to escape, he doesn't just mimic these horrors, he starts to understand them.
Interesting.
He observes their behavior, their strengths, their weaknesses, and he's learning to adapt on a whole new level.
So it's like he's tapping into something deeper than just physical transformation, right?
Absolutely.
It's like he's merging with these creatures, blurring the lines between himself and them.
It makes you think about those ethical implications we talked about before.
Right.
Can you really understand another being just by becoming them? And when does that change who you are?
It's a lot to consider, but it makes you think about empathy too, right?
Yeah.
Like being able to see the world through another's eyes even if they're a terrifying horror.
Absolutely, and that's what makes Caleb's journey so captivating. He's not just fighting to live, he's grappling with identity, the limits of self, and the responsibility that comes with this immense power.
I need to know, does he escape?
He does,
Okay.
but not how we might remember that pinprick of light.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't an exit from the lair, it was something way bigger.
Don't leave me hanging. What was it?
Okay, so it turns out that pinprick of light is like this nexus of energy, this source of power connecting all the horrors.
So he stumbles onto the Shadow King's power source, the thing that fuels all these creatures.
Exactly. And by tapping into that energy, understanding how it works, Caleb not only escapes, he transforms his shape-shifting abilities entirely.
So it's more than just getting away. It's like a total metamorphosis.
Right. He's changed on a fundamental level.
That's amazing. But what about the Shadow King and Anya? What happens to them?
The story mainly focuses on Caleb, but it hints at what happens next. It seems like the Shadow King's hold over everything weakens his control over the horrors, starts to slip.
So Caleb escaping wasn't just about him. It was about upsetting the balance of this whole shadowy world.
And Anya, well, it seems her quest for immortality takes a turn.
Interesting.
Her fate's uncertain, but maybe there's a chance for redemption.
Wow, what a ride. I mean, the Bloodstone Heist started as this cool heist story.
Right.
But it turned into something so much deeper. It made us think about identity, power, and the choices we make.
And it reminded us that even in these fantastical stories, it's the human element that stays with us.
Well said, and that wraps up another episode of Robots vs. Vampires.
We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the Bloodstone Heist.
A story that really pushed us to think outside the box and consider all the possibilities.
Don't forget to rate, follow, and share the show for more incredible stories where sci-fi and fantasy collide. And until next time, keep those imaginations running wild.